Italian science fiction has never played by the rules. While Hollywood promised sleek spaceships and shiny futures, Italy delivered chaos, color, and imagination that left audiences stunned. What happens when a country known for opera and giallo horror points its camera toward the stars? You get movies that confuse, amaze, and sometimes leave you wondering if you actually saw what you think you saw. Are you ready for 12 more wild entries that prove Italian sci-fi was stranger than you ever imagined? War Between the Planets, 1966. What if the Earth itself turned against you? That's the central nightmare of Antonio Margheriti's War Between the Planets, a movie that took the optimism of the space race and twisted it into a story of cosmic collapse. Released in 1966, this wasn't your average space adventure with clean-cut heroes saving the day. Instead, it asked audiences to imagine a planet tearing itself apart and humanity scrambling to survive before the world literally swallowed them whole. Margheriti, often called Italy's master of miniatures, filled the screen with crumbling models of Earth's crust and eerie cosmic visuals that looked like nightmares splashed in neon. His background in low-budget spectacle meant that even a collapsing planet was staged with practical tricks, smoke, and clever lighting. It may not have had Hollywood money, but it delivered shock value through pure imagination. Audiences expecting another rocket launch story instead found themselves staring at the end of the world. The movie's most unsettling element wasn't the effects, though. It was the mood. Scientists bickered, the government panicked, and no one seemed in control. That felt bold in the 1960 seconds, when most sci-fi still treated science as a shining beacon. Here, science was fragile, easily overwhelmed by forces beyond human control. The result was a film that made you feel small, as if the planet itself could betray you at any moment. Critics dismissed it as pulp, but fans embraced its energy. Over the years, War Between the Planets became a cult favorite, shocking not with gore, but with existential dread. It dared to imagine Earth itself as the enemy, and that was a twist audiences never forgot. Snow Devils, 1967. You've heard of alien invasions. You've heard of government conspiracies, but what about alien yetis hiding in the Alps? That's the bizarre premise of Snow Devils, another entry from Antonio Margheriti's wild sci-fi cycle of the 1960 seconds. Released in 1967, this film mashed up creature feature chills with Cold War paranoia, and the result left viewers scratching their heads in disbelief. The movie begins with mysterious attacks in the snowy mountains, which locals blame on avalanches. But soon it's revealed that the culprits are towering creatures disguised as yetis, secretly tied to a plot of extraterrestrial colonization. Yes, the film claimed that aliens were staging their invasion by posing as mythological beasts. That twist alone shocked audiences. It wasn't just science fiction. It was folklore, pulp, and paranoia jammed together like a cinematic snowball. Visually, Snow Devils leaned into icy landscapes and glowing alien tech. The stark contrast of white mountains and neon gadgets gave it an uncanny vibe, like a James Bond thriller filtered through a fever dream. Margheriti used his trademark miniatures for avalanches and alien bases, and while the effects sometimes looked campy, they carried an eerie charm. What made the film memorable, though, was its mood of mistrust. Governments argued, scientists doubted each other, and all the while the supposed monsters lurked in the background. Audiences in 1967 were already living with real fears about Cold War infiltration, and Snow Devils played directly into that tension. The film suggested that the enemy might be disguised among us, hiding in plain sight. Critics laughed at the absurdity, but that was part of its shock. It blended alien, invasion tropes with myth and conspiracy in a way no Hollywood film dared to. Today, it survives as a cult gem, shocking viewers not with polished spectacle, but with the sheer audacity of its ideas. Watching it feels like stumbling into a strange dream, where aliens, snow, and paranoia collide. The Wild Wild Planet, 1966. Now imagine stepping into the future and finding not sleek utopias, but twisted experiments. That's exactly what the Wild Wild Planet offered. Another creation from Antonio Margheriti's fertile imagination, this 1966 film was part of his famous Gamma 1 series. But this wasn't just rockets and astronauts. Instead, audiences were hit with something stranger, scientists kidnapping people to create an army of mutants with grotesque powers. The movie's imagery was enough to stick in your head forever. Picture glamorous women turned into experimental puppets, walking the streets like eerie mannequins. Add to that, laboratories filled with bubbling contraptions and eerie surgical chambers, and you had something closer to a fever dream than a standard space story. Audiences expecting shiny space adventures suddenly found themselves watching a mad scientist's nightmare spill across the screen. What shocked people most was the tonal clash. On one hand, the sets were drenched in bold colors and futuristic style that looked like something out of a 1960 seconds fashion magazine. On the other hand, the storyline was pure pulp horror, filled with body manipulation and sinister experiments. It wasn't optimistic science fiction, it was a twisted warning about technology gone out of control. The performances added to the chaos. Actors delivered dialogue with stone-faced seriousness, even as the plot spiraled into bizarre territory. The result was unsettling. Was this supposed to be camp? Was it supposed to be terrifying? The answer was both, and that confusion gave the film its enduring shock factor. Though mocked by critics at the time, the Wild Planet built a cult following. Viewers couldn't forget its bold visuals and disturbing undertones. It shocked not because of gore, but because it suggested the future might not be heroic at all. It might be a playground for people with the darkest ambitions. Battle of the Worlds, 1961. When Italian Sci-Fi decided to go serious, the results could be just as shocking. Battle of the Worlds, released in 1961, carried the weight of a major name. Claude Rains, the Hollywood veteran who once terrified audiences in The Invisible Man. Seeing him in an Italian production gave the movie instant credibility, but what unfolded was anything but standard fare. The story begins with a rogue planet entering Earth's orbit, threatening global disaster. Sounds familiar, right? But the way Battle of the Worlds unfolded stunned its audience. Instead of focusing on one heroic astronaut or a single government's response, it played like a cold, detached portrait of humanity, facing something incomprehensible. Rains portrayed Professor Benson, a brilliant but abrasive scientist who treats the possible destruction of Earth with icy calm. His lack of sentiment was as shocking as the cosmic threat itself. The film's visuals leaned heavily on Margheriti's love for miniatures. Planets spun across matte-painted skies, rockets blasted through space on visible wires, and models of cities crumbled under disaster. Yet the overall tone wasn't campy. It was strangely grim. For audiences in the early 60 seconds, still grappling with the fear of nuclear war, this detached view of planetary doom felt chillingly real. What made the movie shocking wasn't just the visuals, but its philosophy. Rain's character argued that human lives were insignificant compared to cosmic forces, a statement that undercut every heroic convention audiences expected. Instead of cheering on saviors, viewers were forced to sit with the idea that Earth might not matter at all in the grand scheme of the universe. Though, it wasn't a blockbuster. Battle of the Worlds became a cult classic precisely because it dared to be bleak. Italian Sci-Fi shocked not with monsters this time, but with a worldview so cold it left audiences unsettled long after the credits rolled. Cosmos, War of the Planets, 1977. By the late 1970s, the world had been shaken by Star Wars. Every country wanted its own space opera, and Italy was no exception. But Cosmos, War of the Planets, directed by Alfonso Brescia, wasn't just a copy. It was something far stranger, a film so drenched in neon visuals and offbeat energy that it shocked audiences into silence. The story is classic pulp. Astronauts encounter a hostile planet run by a supercomputer bent on enslaving them. But it's not the story that grabs you, it's the atmosphere. Instead of sleek spaceships, you get glowing corridors lit like discotheques. Instead of convincing robots, you get stiff, humanoid machines that shuffle across the screen like mannequins. The special effects weren't revolutionary, but they were unforgettable, cheap, colorful, and hypnotic in their own way. Audiences in 1977 were expecting a thrill ride like George Lucas delivered. What they got instead was a surreal fever dream. Dialogue drifted into philosophical tangents about machines and humanity, and the pacing often slowed into long, eerie sequences where you couldn't quite tell if you were supposed to be amazed or confused. That tension was exactly what shocked people. It wasn't polished, but it was bold. Critics dismissed it as a bargain bin knockoff. Yet, over time, Cosmos, War of the Planets, gained its own reputation. Fans began to see it not as a failed imitation, but as an unintentional experiment in psychedelic sci-fi. Its neon glow, its awkward sincerity, and its bizarre tone made it unforgettable. What makes the film shocking today is how committed it island. It didn't wink at the audience, it didn't try to be camp. It really believed in its vision of cosmic struggle, no matter how odd the execution. And that sincerity turned a would-be copycat into one of Italy's most eccentric sci-fi spectacles. War of the Robots, 1978. Golden armored androids, stiff space battles, and dialogue that feels like it was beamed in from another dimension. That's War of the Robots. Released in 1978 and directed by Alfonso Brescia, this movie wasn't shy about chasing the Star Wars wave. But instead of polished spectacle, it offered something far stranger. Audiences who came in expecting Luke Skywalker got golden warriors with frozen expressions and space duels that felt like cosmic theater. The plot follows a group of astronauts trying to rescue kidnapped scientists from an alien race that builds armies of humanoid robots. On paper, that sounds familiar enough. But what shocked people was the execution. Costumes gleamed like carnival outfits. Spaceships looked like toys suspended in light beams, and entire battles unfolded in a way that was both clumsy and mesmerizing. You couldn't take your eyes off it, even when it made no sense. What really set this apart was how seriously it took itself. The actors delivered lines with absolute conviction, even while surrounded by cardboard sets and stilted robots. That sincerity created an uncanny tension. Was it parody? Was it genuine? Viewers weren't sure, and that confusion was part of the shock. Critics panned it, of course, calling it one of the strangest space operas ever made. But fans, especially cult movie lovers, embraced it. Late-night TV reruns and bootleg VHS tapes spread its reputation, turning it into a must-see oddity. War of the Robots didn't just shock by failing to be Star Wars. It shocked by showing how far Italian cinema was willing to go in reimagining the genre on a shoestring budget. Today, its golden androids remain some of the most iconic images in Italian sci-fi history, not because they were convincing, but because they were unforgettable. Message from Space, 1978. Sometimes Italian sci-fi didn't work alone. Message from Space was a collaboration with Japan, but its Italian release cemented its place in Europe's sci-fi cult library. Audiences in 1978 thought they were about to see another obvious Star Wars clone. Instead, they got something shockingly original, a tale of glowing seeds, galactic destiny, and warriors brought together by cosmic chance. Directed by Kinji Fukasaku in Japan, but released and marketed in Italy as if it were partly their own, this film mixed samurai codes, spaghetti western energy, and pulp futurism. Imagine Seven Samurai in space, but drenched in neon colors and surreal imagery. The Italian audience had never seen anything like it. Instead of clean space battles, they got chaotic duels lit by glowing effects and heroes who looked like they had wandered in from a fantasy epic. What shocked people most was the sheer boldness. This wasn't pretending to be realistic. It was full-on myth, with characters chosen by glowing seeds that floated through the galaxy like divine messengers. That mystical edge set it apart from the hard science stories of the 1960 seconds. Suddenly, sci-fi wasn't about astronauts anymore. It was about destiny, honor, and dreamlike adventure. For Italian fans, it was a revelation. The mix of cultural styles gave the movie an energy that no Hollywood production had. Sure, it was sometimes clumsy, and the glowing seeds could look ridiculous, but it carried an emotional weight that stuck. Today, Message from Space is remembered as one of the strangest and most heartfelt entries in the post-Star Wars explosion. It shocked not because it failed, but because it dared to turn science fiction into something closer to opera. Mission Stardust, 1967. Before superheroes and space operas dominated the box office, Italy dipped into pulp science fiction with Mission Stardust. Released in 1967, it was based on the German Perry Rhodan novels, which were wildly popular across Europe. On paper, this should have been straightforward. Space explorers encounter aliens and save the world. But the Italian-German production turned it into something far stranger. The movie opens with Perry Rhodan's ship landing on the moon, only to discover an alien vessel carrying a dying princess. That setup alone stunned audiences. Suddenly, the moon wasn't a barren rock, but a stage for galactic destiny. The explorers strike a deal. They'll help save the alien princess if her people share their advanced medicine with Earth. But of course, things spiral into betrayals, conspiracies, and action that feels half spy thriller, half space epic. What shocked people most was the tone. This wasn't optimistic space travel. It was cynical, shadowy, and more in line with Cold War thrillers. The sets looked futuristic but carried a gritty edge, and the aliens felt mysterious rather than welcoming. Instead of clear heroes and villains, everyone seemed suspicious. The film's odd pacing also left audiences rattled. One moment you were in a space opera, the next you were in a noir conspiracy tale. That whiplash created a uniquely unsettling effect. It wasn't Hollywood sleekness, it was European pulp stitched together into something unpredictable. Though critics didn't know what to make of it, Mission Stardust developed a cult following. Fans were shocked not by giant monsters or world-ending disasters, but by how seriously it treated pulp material. It felt more like a secret agent film that stumbled into space, and that bizarre mix is exactly why people still talk about it today. Warriors of the Year, 2072198. What happens when you throw gladiators, dystopian futures, and Italian flair into a blender? You get Warriors of the Year 2072, a Lucio Fulci-directed spectacle that shocked audiences with its brutal vision of televised combat. Released in 1984, the film imagined a society where entertainment had devolved into deadly arena matches, broadcast to a battered population numbed by violence. Sound familiar? It was decades ahead of the Hunger Games and other arena dystopias. The movie opens with a chilling premise. Prisoners are forced into high-tech gladiator battles inside massive arenas, their every move broadcast live. The crowds cheer, the government profits, and humanity slowly loses its soul. Fulci, best known for horror, brought his trademark intensity to science fiction, and it left viewers unsettled. This wasn't glamorous heroism, it was exploitation turned into entertainment, with chilling echoes of Rome's ancient colosseums. Visually, the film delivered shock through sheer contrast. Futuristic sets gleamed with sterile steel, while the gladiatorial fights felt raw and chaotic. The combination made audiences feel both fascinated and disturbed. One moment you were marveling at neon corridors, the next you were watching desperate figures fighting for survival in stage spectacles. The commentary hit harder than expected. In an era when TV was rapidly expanding and mass media was shaping culture, Warriors of the Year 2072 asked a dark question. What if the screen demanded not just drama, but real suffering? That question shocked audiences more than any special effect. While not a mainstream success, the film became a cult treasure. It shocked by predicting a future where humanity's thirst for spectacle outweighs its morality. Watching it now feels eerie, as if Fulci saw into the DNA of modern reality shows and twisted it into a nightmare decades before anyone else dared. Hands of Steel 1986. Imagine a cross between the Terminator and a truck stop brawl, and you've got Hands of Steel. Released in 1986 and directed by Sergio Martino, this movie shocked audiences not because it was polished, but because it was so brazen. It told the story of Paco Cuauhtémoc, a cyborg assassin who defies his programming and tries to reclaim his humanity. On the surface, it's another robot versus man tale. But what set it apart was how unapologetically Italian it felt. From the opening moments, the film hit with a raw energy. Paco isn't a sleek, emotionless machine. He's a conflicted figure, torn between his programming and his conscience. Instead of high-tech labs and gleaming skyscrapers, much of the action unfolds in grimy diners, desert motels, and underground arm wrestling arenas. Yes, arm wrestling. One of the movie's most shocking twists was how it turned a simple barroom contest into a metaphor for survival. Audiences in the 1980 seconds, already familiar with Hollywood's polished cyborg stories, weren't prepared for this kind of grit. The fights felt desperate, the villains were cartoonishly menacing, and the atmosphere was thick with exploitation charm. What shocked people wasn't just the violence, but the heart buried underneath. Paco's struggle to resist control wasn't played for laughs. It was surprisingly emotional, especially for a movie that looked like it should have been pure pulp. Critics dismissed it as a ripoff, but fans saw something more. Over time, Hands of Steel gained cult status for its mix of muscle, neon, and unexpected sincerity. It's shocked by proving that, even in a film dripping with campy action, questions about free will and humanity could still sneak in. Endgame, 1983. In the early 1980 seconds, Italian sci-fi turned toward post-apocalyptic nightmares, and Endgame stands out as one of the wildest. Directed by Joe D'Amato in 1983, this film shocked audiences by combining mutant telepaths, dystopian gladiators, and grimy cityscapes into one chaotic vision of the future. It didn't just imitate Mad Max, it mashed that energy with Italy's love for pulp excess. The setup is classic dystopia. In a ruined New York of the future, society survives by feeding on televised blood sport. Our protagonist, a gladiator named Ron Shannon, is forced to lead a team of mutants with psychic powers across a dangerous wasteland, while the ruling elites place bets on his survival. It's part chase movie, part survival thriller, and part mutant soap opera. Audiences weren't sure what they were watching, but they couldn't look away. What shocked people most was the blend of tones. One moment you'd see gritty street fights that felt raw and desperate. The next you'd encounter mutants with glowing eyes using strange psychic powers. That mix of grindhouse action and paranormal spectacle gave the movie an unhinged energy. It wasn't clean or polished. It was messy, unpredictable, and thrilling in its audacity. Visually, Endgame leaned into dystopian decay. Crumbling cityscapes, barren wastelands, and harsh lighting gave the film a sense of hopelessness. But instead of delivering despair, it turned survival into a spectacle. The commentary wasn't subtle. Media and power thrive on human suffering. That message, paired with bizarre mutants, shocked audiences far more than the rubbery effects. Though not widely acclaimed, Endgame became a cult treasure, remembered as one of Italy's most brazen takes on post-apocalyptic storytelling. It's shocked by refusing to pick a lane, blending action, horror, and sci-fi into one unforgettable ride. 2019. After the Fall of New York, 1983. Few Italian sci-fi films shocked audiences quite like 2019, After the Fall of New York. Directed by Sergio Martino and released in 1983, it blended the grit of Escape from New York with the feral chaos of Mad Max. But this wasn't just imitation. It was a nightmare vision that left viewers stunned by its sheer intensity. The story takes place after a global catastrophe, where a mercenary named Parsifal is tasked with finding the last fertile woman on Earth, hidden in the ruins of New York. That mission sounds simple, but the journey is anything but. Mutant gangs roam the streets, bizarre tribes guard the wastelands, and every corner of the city feels like a booby-trapped nightmare. Audiences were shocked by how relentless it all felt. There was no safe space, no pause, just constant tension. What really set it apart was its world building. Instead of shiny spaceships, the future looked like rusting cars, scorched skyscrapers, and burned-out tunnels. The costumes mixed punk, medieval armor, and pure fantasy, creating a look that was equal parts absurd and terrifying. Viewers couldn't decide if they should laugh at the spectacle or shiver at how raw it felt. The film's underlying message added another layer of shock. Instead of offering hope, it painted a bleak picture of humanity's future, where survival is brutal and compassion is scarce. For Italian audiences in the 1980 seconds, still living under Cold War fears, that vision struck a chord. It wasn't just sci-fi, it was a mirror of anxieties that felt all too real. Over the years, 2019, After the Fall of New York has earned cult status, shocking not just for its violence but for its audacity. It dared to imagine a future where humanity had nearly given up, and it did so with a style that only Italian cinema could pull off. So, there you have it, 12 more Italian sci-fi films that didn't just entertain, they blindsided audiences with strange ideas, wild visuals, and bold energy. From glowing robots to post-apocalyptic gladiators, these movies prove that Italy never played it safe with science fiction. Which one shocked you the most, the mutant nightmares, the alien yetis, or the neon-drenched space operas? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe for more cinematic deep dives. After all, the weirdest journeys through space often come from the most unexpected places.